As we've been hearing, more and more company executives are joining the argument now about the referendum. Today, more than 100 business leaders added their names to a declaration in favour of independence. One of those was Frank McKirgan, a former Global Head of Equities at RBS, the Royal Bank of Scotland. Thank you for joining us, Mr. McKirgan. Why have you decided to support independence when so many other business leaders have decided that independence would be bad for the Scottish economy?
Well, I think it's wrong to suggest that there's a whole bunch of business people on the no side and only one or two on the yes side. Through the campaign, I've met literally hundreds of business people who are convinced by the yes argument and can see beyond the short-term issues that the no campaign are throwing out and are much more excited by the longer-term business opportunities for Scots in Scotland.
What about Standard today suggesting that if independence comes, they are going to shift out of Scotland and into England?
I think what they're talking about is contingency plans. So what they're saying is that they are putting plans together in case a whole bunch of negative scenarios come about. But I don't see those scenarios coming about. I think there will be a currency union and there will be a single market for financial products in the United Kingdom, because it's in the best interest of all parts of what is currently the United Kingdom for that to be so. But I can understand company executives looking at all sorts of scenarios that I think are frankly unlikely and coming up with contingency plans for that. This is nothing new from Standard Life. They've said this before. It's contingency planning for a scenario that I don't see coming about.
But what you're doing is pinning your hopes on saying, I know better than the Governor of the Bank of England, I know better than the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I know better than Ed Balls, all of whom have made it very clear that they do not see a currency union coming about after independence, for the obvious reason that the remaining members of the United Kingdom want to control their currency, and if they had a currency union with an independent nation, they wouldn't have that control.
I think, to be fair to the Westminster politicians, it seems like they've only started thinking about these issues in the last couple of weeks as the campaign has got incredibly close.
Well, to be fair to the Governor of the Bank of England, he made that speech right back at the beginning of the year.
But I don't expect, in the result of a yes vote, I don't expect the rest of the UK to do Scotland any favours, but I do expect them to behave with rational self-interest. I think in the aftermath of a yes vote, if everyone sits down and looks at the situation and says what's in the best interest of both parties, to me it's absolutely blindingly clear that that is a currency union with a single market for financial services.
But it's also blindingly clear, isn't it, that were you to be right, were there to be a currency union, the sort of financial disciplines which are being required currently in all of the UK and would still be required in the rest of the UK would mean that Alex Salmond couldn't possibly deliver on the economic promises he's making on welfare and other things.
Well, not surprisingly, I strongly disagree with that. I think the plans that have been put forward in the Yes campaign are eminently achievable. But if what you're saying is that small...
Yeah, but not with a currency union when you've signed away that control.
I think a currency union is the best interest of both parties, and I think Scotland can prosper within that. And the same as many countries have prospered within currency unions. And for people like Paul Krugman to come up with scare stories about what happened in the Eurozone, I think is just totally unrealistic. That is not what would happen in a currency union between Scotland and the rest of the UK.
Why?
Because one of the reasons why you had problems in the Eurozone would not be replicated in a currency union in the UK. You had countries in the Eurozone at completely different levels of productivity, completely different stages of economic development. Scotland and the rest of the UK have almost identical levels of productivity and are in very similar economic stages of development. As two very eminent economists who are part of the Commission, Professors Merles and Professor Stiglitz pointed out, that's an eminently stable and suitable monetary environment for Scotland to prosper within.
But why, if the Scots people decide to vote for independence, should the rest of the UK continue to underwrite the Scottish economy? It doesn't seem to make sense. If you want to go your own way, but don't expect other people to pick up the bill.
But I don't see it as the rest of the UK picking up the bill for Scotland. I think Scotland wants to stand...
Underwriting the Scottish economy, being the lender of last resort, would be doing exactly that, wouldn't it?
Well, for an independent Scotland, the financial sector would be smaller as a percentage of GDP than it is in the UK currently, so I don't see that being a problem.
Yes, but it would still be the situation that given important companies like RBS, which you used to work for, based in Scotland, that if there was a currency union, that would mean that voters in England, voters in Wales, voters in Northern Ireland would be underwriting the economic performance of those banks. And I'm just saying, if you want to go your own way, why would you expect voters in those countries to do that?
First of all the hard work that's been done in every bank in the world in the last 5 or 6 years has been to make banks safer. Capital ratios are multiples of what they were before the crisis, number one. Second point is, when governments are involved in bailing out financial institutions, it's a multilateral effort. The British government got involved in bailing out the Irish banks. The Federal Reserve provided hundreds of billions of dollars in liquidity to UK banks like RBS and Barclays because that's where the economic assets were deployed. So bailouts in the future, should they come about, and I hope they don't, and we should regulate to make sure that that's increasingly unlikely, are done on a multilateral basis based upon where the economic assets are deployed.
Mr. McKirgan, thank you very much indeed for joining us.